Did you know that the Pop Culture Preservation Society depends on support from listeners like you to keep our podcast up and running? We are an independent operation, creating, producing, distributing, and promoting the podcast by ourselves and paying for it out of our own pockets because we love it and we think it's worth it to preserve the well-loved cultural nuggets from our Gen X youth. If you'd like to become a supporter of the PCPS, go to patreon.com, Patreon, and search for Pop Culture Preservation Society. Our Patreon supporters are like our pit crew, giving us the fuel we need to keep on trucking. And as a Patreon supporter, you'll also get special thank you gifts, like video recordings of our episodes, after the episode discussions, invitations to live events over Zoom, and the occasional blooper delivered straight to your inbox. Thank you so much for listening and for being a part of our society. Welcome to this encore presentation of our tribute to the books of Judy Blume, one of the very first episodes we ever recorded and released, which is crazy, right?
It's crazy. Was it 5? I think it was episode 5,
or
you guys.
2 or 3. Or,
right.
It was so
I believe
early
it was
on.
5.
The fact that this was one of our very first episodes, I think, is probably because that just says how prominent Judy Blume was in our Gen X childhood.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons we started this podcast in the first place. Yep. So we're releasing this one as an encore today because right now, Judy Blume is having such a moment. If you Google Judy Blume, you'll see articles in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Time Magazine, Variety. Everyone is profiling Judy Blume. More than 50 years after she released Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. 53 years after that book was released. And a lot of that has to do with what's coming on April 28th. It's something I've been waiting for since 4th grade when I read Margaret for the very first time. And that is the theatrical release of the movie Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Coming to a theater near you on April 28th. Get your friends and go. Mm-hmm. People are positively wetting themselves about this event. But that is not all, you guys. It's not just Margaret coming to theaters. Just 1 week before the release of Margaret, on April 21st, Amazon Prime is premiering a favorite from the Sundance Film Festival this year, which is a documentary about the life and career of Judy Blume, called Judy Blume Forever. So cue that up. Then Netflix has reportedly ordered a new series based on the book Forever.
Oh,
and I know.
I just wet my pants.
I know. I have nipple lightning big time right now.
Then Jenna Bush Hager is producing Summer Sisters as a series on Peacock, and Disney Plus is working on an animated film of Super Fudge. I mean, it's just fast and furious.
That one makes me cry. Imagine watching an animated version of Super Fudge, I'm all about that. Also, can I just say real quick, you guys, can we all please, to have a moment like she's having at age 85 is just girl power, all caps.
Yeah.
I mean, that woman is queen, and I could not be more thrilled for her and for everyone else who's getting to feel her light right now.
Exactly. And speaking of, her finding her moment, she is on the cover of Variety magazine in the Women Empower issue. And if you Google that, and maybe we can put a link in the Weekly Reader, because there are photos of her photo shoot. I mean, she's doing a full out modeling photo shoot, and it is so cute, and she looks great, and she's it is her moment, and it is.
Yeah, it really
and she's not trying to be someone she isn't. We are celebrating this woman that we've loved, the three of us, since we were little girls, and I'm so excited. It just bodes so well for us when we're on the cover of Women in Power Variety issue.
Yeah, it does. When we're 85.
It's so crazy to think about, because you have to wonder, why did it take so long? Why did it take 50 years for this to happen? And the answer is quite clear. The reason that it took so long for all of this to happen is because the people who read Judy Blume in the 70s and 80s needed to grow up and become the people in power in Hollywood. Boom.
Amen.
That's right.
And here we are today.
And in podcast land. Boom.
Yeah.
That is us.
But it makes so much sense, right? It's not just people are looking for quality material, because she said that throughout, in every decade, people from Hollywood were coming to her and be like, all right, Judy Blume, what do you want to do? But she said it was all men. That's how people, they have big cigars.
They talk like a 20s news guy. Oh, Judy Blume.
And that's the signal that they don't understand. And they really didn't. All they knew is that there were lots of book sales, and so they would come to her and say, what should we do? And she'd be like, I don't know, you're the expert, you tell me. And then all of these deals would fall flat. Apparently, even Aaron Spelling offered her $100,000 to, what was it? Was it Margaret he was going to bring to the screen?
It was maybe Margaret. I can't remember. I read that too. And
Margaret, and then again, Maybe I Won't.
Yes.
She was going to do both of them. Fell flat. She wrote a script for Deanie. Fell flat.
Right. And when I read the one about Aaron Spelling, I thought, thank you, God, that didn't happen. I mean, I just can't imagine.
It would have been
the poor Forever with Dean Butler. I think they probably didn't do a great job with that one. So I'm glad to see that that's coming back as a series. But
yeah, me too.
I just can't imagine the soapy, cheesy way
it
they
would
would
have been
brought those.
Not to
knock
to knock this movie because it's so campy and we've done a whole episode on it, but it would have been very sooner or later-ish, I feel.
Oh, for sure.
If she would
and
have
would
done
they
it.
Really
or
have,
if Aaron Spelling would have done it.
In 1978 or 79 or whenever this was, when they really brought that to our TV screens, would they really have said the word period? I don't think they would.
Right.
No, I don't think so either. And that actually brings that. Right.
Remember
that
we're
brings
saying
up
tinkle instead or whatever,
yes,
like on Match Game.
I love saying tinkle. Okay.
You
but
can't
that
say
actually,
urinate. You have to say tinkle.
Tinkle's so cute, though. That brings up a point I wanted to make here, though, that when Judy Blume first wrote and published Margaret, she actually had parents in her own kids' school who had a lot of resistance toward her talking about periods and having girls talk to each other about their periods. God. And Judy Blume is like, what do you think? Like, why? I mean, there's almost like nothing you can say to that. Like, how can that be offensive to anybody?
Like, you want it to be a surprise?
Right. And then, these books.
And you don't think they're already talking about it? I mean, get with the program. I know that the principal was one of the main
that's right.
naysayers. And, I'm thinking, figure some middle-aged, bald, no offense to principals out there. Right. But back then, I'm imagining some, guy with a little paunch and just saying, we don't want the girl. Or I can't do voices like Kristin.
Well, it's like we don't want the girls
talking about periods.
As if that's something that is, a dangerous topic to bring up. And, Judy Blume today in 2023, Judy Blume is still having to talk about this, you guys. And she's still saying things like, in the very state she lives in, there are legislators that are trying to control everything that children think and know and question and learn. And there's even legislation out there trying to prevent girls in elementary school. You guys, this is today in 2023.
Right now.
Prevent girls in elementary school from talking about their periods. I mean, it's the same thing as we were dealing with 30 and 40 years ago. And Judy Blume says, good luck there. I just feel so happy that Judy Blume books and Judy Blume's voice is still out there and is still influencing our young people today.
One thing I want to emphasize is that when we recorded this podcast, 2 years ago, and we talked about the book banning issue that she dealt with throughout the 70s and the 80s, we had no idea what was coming. Because what is happening right now is far worse than what was happening in the 80s. We think that there has been progress that has been made, but the truth is we're in the most dangerous times ever.
That is so scary, but I'm hopeful because you guys, ever since the movie was announced, it's not even out yet, but since it was announced, Judy Blume's publishing house, Simon & Schuster, said that since publicity began for the film, sales of the 50-year-old novel have shot up 762% from a year ago. And the movie isn't even out yet. So good luck, everybody. People are buying this book, and it's still as timely now. And I loved this quote that Jason Reynolds, a children's book author, shared in Judy Blume's documentary. And he said, I don't think that Judy Blume wrote her books to be timeless. I think she wrote her books to be timely. And they were so timely that they became timeless. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
That just,
totally.
It's beautifully put because it's so true.
And we can't let go. And it's just as relevant to the children today. We 53-year-old women can't let go. Wait, I'm not 53. I'm 55. That's not even close. We can't let go, and the children of today are still reading them. I mean, that is a legacy.
Well, isn't it? And that's good literature. That's art. I mean, the fact that
is.
something can be written that many years ago and still hit nerves and be relevant today. It's just what art is and good literature. And Judy Blume does it.
Listeners, we know you are excited about the movie, and we are thrilled to be partnering with Team Margaret and Lionsgate to bring you exclusive content. So, I know, how amazing is that, you guys?
I know.
So fun. So stay tuned for a very special Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret episode coming early in season 9.
Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be so fun.
Thanks for listening, everybody, today, and please enjoy this encore episode of, what is it called?
Are you there,
God,
Judy? It's us?
It's us.
Are you there, Judy? It's Kristin, Carolyn, and Michelle. It's us. Are you there, Judy? It's us, Kristin, Carolyn, and Michelle, I think. Enjoy.
Back to the erection.
Oh, back to the erection. And particularly unwanted erection.
Hello world is a song that we're singing. Come on, get happy. A whole lot of loving is what we'll be bringing. We'll make you happy.
Welcome to the Pop Culture Preservation Society, the podcast for people born in the big wheel generation who got their news from Dynamite, their books from Scholastic, and their music from K-Tel.
We believe our Gen X childhoods gave us unforgettable songs, stories, characters, and images. And if we don't talk about them, they'll disappear like Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition.
And today, we will be saving the beloved, best-selling, and banned books of Judy Blume.
I'm Carolyn.
I'm Kristin.
And I'm Michelle.
And we are your pop culture preservationists. 50 years ago, in the year 1970, a children's book came out by a new author that would, for the first time ever, shamelessly address the universal female experience of growing breasts and getting your first period. That book has been read by literally every woman / former girl that I know. Literally every single one. It was our handbook for growing up, thus cementing it into the Gen X Hall of Fame. And because that handbook has never gone out of style, today, 50 years after its release, that book will finally be made into a major motion picture in the very near future. And that book, of course, is...
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
You guys, is it even possible to overstate the significance of Margaret and Judy Blume to your 5th grade classroom in 1978 or 1975 or 1979? Did I get the years right for you?
Or I would keep going with it. Or 1984 or 1990 or
2004.
Exactly. 2000. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if kids are still reading it. My kids are older, but when my kids were in 4th and 5th grade, they were reading it. And that was in, the mid 2000s, late 2000s.
So what was it
late 2000s, but you know what I mean. Right. It transcends the decades.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I can remember, this is kind of going back to something I referred to in the Christmas episode, but wanting my daughter to have that experience. So giving her, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and just like, come on, it's time to read it, and getting so excited. And she's not wanting to have anything to do with it, which was also kind of a weird disappointment because I couldn't wait to read it and she didn't want to read it.
It's because you gave it to her.
I know.
We mothers have to learn, and we never do. Don't give your daughters books because they will not read it because you gave it to them.
Anything.
Give it to your friend and have your friend give it to them. Or grandma can do it. Grandma can give your child books and they'll read them.
You're
but
right.
if I give anything to my son, it's on the nightstand, but it's not going anywhere.
But like, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is such a, it's almost like this, it's created this giant club or sorority, right? And it's like our secret handshake is that we must increase our breasts. That's all you would have to do is go up to someone, any woman our age, any, woman 10, 15 years younger than us, or gosh.
In any region of the country.
And just say
anywhere.
those words. All you have to do is say those words and they know exactly what you're talking about.
Everybody knows what you're talking about. And I mean, just to give an example. So the three of us are here fangirling about Judy Blume, and we all grew up in different places. I grew up in St. Paul. So we're talking 5th grade in particular. I'm just putting a pin in 5th grade because that's kind of when it exploded for me. I was in St. Paul. Carolyn, you were where?
I was in Houston, Texas.
And Michelle, you were where in fifth grade?
Fifth grade, I was in Ridgefield, Washington, tiny little town just north of Vancouver.
And in my fifth grade classroom in St. Paul, Minnesota, Judy Blume was like an electric current that was running through the classroom, making its way, jumping from one girl to the next. There wasn't anybody who wasn't touched by Judy Blume. And it continues to this day. And that's why I say I don't know a woman who didn't read those books in fifth grade.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about that club and it makes me excited to think, Katie Couric is in that club.
Yes.
And like Jennifer Garner. Like any of us could go up to those people and we'd all just in unison start saying, I must. And we'd all know what we were talking about.
Beyonce is probably in that club.
Oh, I have no doubt.
That is a really good observation, Carolyn. We're in the same club. That's so funny. Okay. Do you guys remember your first exposure to Judy Blume? The first time you learned who Judy Blume was or what? What was the first book that caught your attention?
I don't know. I honestly, I feel like I can't remember a time when I didn't know Judy Blume books. I don't know. I'm not sure which books I started with. I know I loved, I think it would be probably like Sheila, and otherwise known as Sheila the Great, and, Peter and Fudge, but I don't know because, like I said, I can't remember what the first one was. I know that, I'm pretty sure Margaret I read before fifth grade, because my sister and I used to act out all the Judy Blume books when we lived in this farmhouse in Oregon when I was in like fourth grade. And so, I don't know. I just know they all it's like a domino effect. I just know that they all just kind of go in to each other for me.
But the fact that you have a memory of them always existing, that in and of itself is sort of an indication. Carolyn, do you remember?
Yeah. Well, I would say mine were read alouds, and it was Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing and Blubber. I remember being read aloud by my teachers, which is interesting because I felt like it was a huge leap to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It just felt like, what? That's the, Fourth Grade Nothing and Super Fudge and that kind. I mean, it did not
going from that to
felt
bullying.
A little different or something. There was something incongruous.
Well, and it was following you on your own development. If you think about it.
Well, it really was
right?
when you think about it. Yes.
When you were ready for Margaret, there it was waiting for you. My first exposure is very distinct for me. It was in second grade, a read aloud, just like you, Carolyn, in Miss Swartz's class, except I said Mithworth. In second grade, I said Mithworth. And she read Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing. And this was significant for me in a lot of ways because I had just moved from California to Minnesota and everything was different. The people were different. The names were different. The things people ate was different. And it turns out that the books that they read in school were also different. And so when Mithworth read Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing, I remember thinking that this book was so modern. It had contemporary kids in it. And so my teachers in California must have been reading books from the 50s. And that's what I thought of as a children's book. And I was fascinated by the fact that they lived in these high-rise apartment buildings. As whole families living in Manhattan, living in New York City. That was fascinating to me. These books were funny and the kids weren't precious.
Right.
And so when I moved to Minnesota, I had this idea that Minnesota was like this mecca of all things modern and new. They had bathrooms inside at school. It was crazy.
The irony that Minnesota would be the new and California would be the old-fashioned.
Well, I lived in a small farming town, so that
were they reading like Boxcar Children to you, or what were they reading?
Honestly, I don't even remember. That says something right there that the first one that I actually have a concrete memory of is Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. I remember them reading to us. I remember Mrs. Jacobson and Mrs. Morgan reading books, but I don't remember any of the titles, meaning I must have been nominally invested. Whereas when Mithworth was reading Tales of I can't even say it, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, I was all there. It was modern, and these were kids that I would hang out with. They weren't precious little children.
I totally agree with you, though, on I was infatuated with their lifestyle, with living in New York City, and they all lived in the same apartment building, and they rode an elevator to get to their house.
I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
And they had friends that lived down the hall. And especially when you live in a small town, we didn't have many apartment buildings in our small farming town. That doesn't mean that people weren't renting property. They were. We just didn't have apartment buildings. So that was crazy. That was like watching a TV show or something.
I also was fascinated by the father working at the TV studio.
Oh yeah, doing the ad campaigns.
Yeah, like he was the ad guy. But then that whole storyline, I loved it. Was it the toddle bikes? Wasn't it the toddle bikes or something?
Yeah,
had to go ride the toddle bike or something like that.
Can I just go on the record and say, for any listeners we have out there, do not worry if you do not remember all of the little details of these books. I do not know how these women remember the ad campaign that the father who worked at
I used
TV
to read
studio.
it aloud to my students when I was a teacher.
Well, that
so
might
be it. And I read aloud to my own kids. But yeah, I bet that's the first exposure was. But I started with Sheila. I started otherwise known as Sheila the Great, and that's how I got into Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing.
So Sheila was your first one.
Sheila must have been my first Judy Blume character because I was a huge Beverly Cleary fan. So I went right, and I was an early reader. So I went right from all the Ramona books and everything into Sheila and Peter and Fudge. And
Okay. So I'm sensing a direction. If you had, and I'm going to ask Michelle first, because I know what she's going to say. If you had to choose, could you pick a top 3?
Oh, it's so hard. Well, I otherwise known as Sheila the Great, because I fell in love with Sheila before I fell in love with any other character, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it. And then my other two, it's really hard, but Blubber, because that's probably one I read repeatedly. And more than any other ones, and starring Sally J. Friedman as herself. I was fascinated by that book, and I can't really pinpoint why. I don't know if it was because it took place in a different time in history, if it was just because of the whole kind of subplot where she thought was it someone who lived in her grandma's community she thought was Hitler or something like that?
Mr. Zavodsky. Yeah, Mr. Zavodsky lived in her apartment building, and she thought he was Hitler.
Okay, so there was that whole kind of subplot going on. And so that, and to be honest with you, I was fascinated by the cover of that book. Does that make sense? I remember the cover where she's trying to be the pinup girl. She's looking in the mirror.
And she's putting the hibiscus behind her ear.
Yeah, I loved that book.
I love that book too. Now, Sheila, I will point out, for people who don't remember, Sheila, otherwise known as Sheila the Great, is connected to Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, because Peter Hatcher is in Sheila, right?
Yes, and Sheila is their friend, and she's the one who's allergic to dogs.
Yes,
she gets hives. Well, she's not really. She's afraid of dogs, but she tells everyone she's allergic to dogs and that she gets hives.
Right. And so they vacation together in Maine, and Judy Blume conceived of this book when she went on her own vacation to Maine in Southwest Harbor. She was renting a house in Southwest Harbor for the summer, and if you need a place to go post-pandemic and you're looking for a good vacation spot, Southwest Harbor is beautiful. And so she took Southwest Harbor, she just picked it up and she plopped it down in the book. So all of the stores she went to, all of the people that she meets, the people that she actually took their names and put them in the book. She said she arrived at her rental house and there was a swing hanging there and the story just came to her.
Wow.
And there's Sheila and there's Peter Hatcher on vacation in Maine. Okay, so your top 3, Michelle, were otherwise known as Sheila the Great, Blubber, and starring Sally J. Friedman as herself. Carolyn, can you pick a top 3? Is it possible?
Well, I have a top 3. I don't know that I would say they're my favorite. They are just the ones that left indelible memories with me, what was going on in my life at the same time. So, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret is one that I would have to put up there. Deanie was another one because there was, I don't know if you all remember this, but being checked for scoliosis during gym class in middle school, and you'd bend over and go through that process. And I'll never forget, I had to bend over like 3 times. Everybody else was getting out of line, and the teacher would say, or the gym teacher, bend over again. And then they wrote something down on a piece of paper. You have no idea. It was just
terrifying.
Awful.
Had you already read Deanie?
Yeah. Well, this is what's interesting. It was just, I think that I had, but I think I went back to it again, because like that maybe didn't mean as much to me then, but I was like, oh my gosh, that was like Deanie in that book. Yeah. And so then I went back to it. I think this probably could trace my anxiety issues back to this, because I was just sure I had it. And then I had to go get x-rays and all that. Turns out I didn't, but that book and just how she had to deal with all of that. And then now revisiting that book, it's not as much about her and her feelings about the brace. It's more about her mother. I don't know if you remember, but her mother was that kind of stage mom that we all read about and hear about, that stereotype. And
did she want Deanie to be a model?
Yes,
she wanted Deanie to be a model, right?
Be a model. And
the sister was going to be something too. The sister,
she was the smart one.
Okay. Yeah, so it's really very much about parental expectations. Deanie is the beauty, Helen is the brain. And Judy said, this is so funny you say that, Carolyn, because Judy Blume has said that she got the idea from Deanie after having a conversation with a woman about her daughter being diagnosed with scoliosis. And this mother was beside herself, and she was far more upset than her daughter was. And that's where the seed came from. And I also get, like you said, the stage mother thing. I get a very Fame vibe from Deanie. Do you remember Doris Fensecker from Fame, who's trying out for the High School of Performing Arts, and her mother's got the camera out while she's same relationship exactly. The Brooklyn mother pushing her daughter.
Right.
And Deanie doesn't even want to be a model. She doesn't care.
Right. So that book, and then again, maybe I won't, because it kind of gave us a window into the boys and what they were experiencing. And I really didn't have any other way of getting that information, because I wasn't going to talk to a boy. I didn't have any brothers. I wasn't going to talk to my parents about it. So it was kind of educational in terms of that stuff.
And I totally agree. And it's interesting. I was reading a New York Times article where they interviewed some famous authors and celebrities and kind of asked them what Judy Blume books meant to them. And John Green, John Green.
Oh, I love John Green. Oh, Kristin, I know. I saw John Green in person together.
Oh, I love his books too. He actually said kind of the flip of what you just said, Carolyn. He said he loved Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret for that very reason, because it gave him an insight into what girls were going through. He said, the boys don't go to that class. Or, they didn't when he was in school. So he said he loved reading her books, and especially Margaret, because he could kind of helped him understand what girls were going through.
So I'm mirroring you a little bit, Carolyn, because my surprise number 3, and I guess it's not very surprising at all now that I understand, my surprise number 3 is Then Again, Maybe I Won't. And I couldn't really identify before why I enjoyed it so much, but it must be that there were these things that I didn't understand and I didn't know how to get the information. Although I did ask my dad what a wet dream was. I was sitting in the living room. Gordy was reading his book. I'm reading my book, and they get to the part about the wet dream, and I just popped out with, "What is a wet dream?" And he sat there for a minute, just really silent, like I'm sure he was going, shit. And he finally said, "It's like a period for boys." And I put my nose right back in my book and willed him to stop speaking. Stop speaking.
Did you think boys bled?
Oh, yes, I know. So I thought he was having blood coming out of his penis.
Oh my God.
Dad, Gordy, we need to get Gordy on the line right now.
He needs to explain himself.
Oh my goodness.
And there were so many things, and Then Again, Maybe I Won't, that, he talks about getting hard. I'm like, what is hard? I didn't understand.
Oh my God. Now that you said that, that brings back such a memory for me too. Remembering the first couple times I read that book, not understanding what that meant either.
What is hard? Yeah. Well, he was getting hard. Like, it was a math problem that was hard? I didn't know. Okay, so Then Again, Maybe I Won't is my surprise number 3. My number 2 is Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. It's one of the funniest books that I've ever read. It is a model for how I try to write my own stuff, right? It's mostly about the characters that she created. I will always love Peter Hatcher. I will always love Fudge. Those are just the funniest 2 people ever created. And then my number 1 is Like You, Michelle, starring Sally J. Friedman as herself. And that one is different from her other books significantly. The sentence structure is different. The story is different. It's the only one that goes back in time. But I really, really identified with Sally, and I thought she was hilarious too. The whole idea of her thinking that Mr. Zavodsky was Hitler was just funny. But then back to John Green. So John Green, of course, is the author of The Fault in Our Stars. Did I say that right? The Fault in Our Stars? God, total brain fart. So Judy Blume has said that she had just one goal when she was writing her books, and that was to be honest. And she did that by addressing the things that she worried about as a child. She had so many questions, especially about growing up, things about puberty. When was she going to grow breasts? When was she going to get her period? And she was a late bloomer, and that really bothered her, and she wondered if something was wrong with her, and she just wanted to be normal, and nobody would share this information with her. And she felt like there were so many secrets that people were keeping. And because she was an anxious child, when nobody would talk about these things, the things that she made up in her brain about what could possibly be wrong were far worse than the actual answers. And
well, that doesn't sound familiar.
I know, right?
I relate to that. Yeah. Huh.
Well, I don't have blood coming out of my penis. So this became her hallmark, which was talking about the things that nobody would talk about. She talks about how she asked her dad about periods. I mean, she really wanted to know this stuff. She's putting cotton balls in her t-shirt and she's trying to figure out what she's going to look like when she's a big lady. And she asks her dad about periods, and he tries to tell her something about the full moon and lunar cycles. And so then she has this idea in her head that every time there's a full moon, every single woman on the planet is having her period right then. So the secrets were driving her crazy. So that's why her books are about these things that no one will talk about. So I'd like to do an experiment with you guys. I have a list of things we're not supposed to talk about, particularly with children. We have to protect the little children. And I want to see if there's a corresponding Judy Blume book that comes up in your mind.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah. I feel like this is a little bit of a quiz or a test.
And there's more than one answer for each one.
Does everyone know that you are a school librarian?
I'm
Kristin?
A librarian.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted that to go on the record.
If listeners are wondering, like, wow, Kristin is really knowledgeable about all this stuff. And Michelle and Carolyn know
I'm kind of savant.
Yeah.
Carolyn and Michelle are teachers. I'm a children's librarian. So we have a wealth of knowledge between the three of us.
Well, it's been 25 years for me. So.
And we're parents too. Okay, so here we go. Drum roll, please. Getting your first bra.
Oh, yeah. Are you there, God? It's Me Margaret.
What word just came out of my mouth?
I don't know what that was.
Magua.
Getting your first period.
That's Margaret.
I would say, are you there, God? It's Me, Margaret, as well.
And also in Deanie. There are multiple titles for each one of these. Masturbation.
Yeah, that's what I remember from Deanie.
Oh, hell yeah.
And also, then again, maybe I won't. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep. Wet dreams. We already talked about.
Maybe I won't.
And again, maybe I won't.
Periods for boys.
Yes. Losing your virginity.
Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh.
Pregnancy.
Well, I know. They talk about it in Forever. That was my first birth control, reading about it.
I didn't put birth control on here. That would have been a good thing to put on the list. And sometimes it's
then again, maybe I won't. Doesn't his sister-in-law gets pregnant? He wonders, I was just skimming through that, doing a little bit of research this weekend, and he's like, she says she's pregnant, and he's like, I don't even want to think about what they have to do for her to get pregnant. She gets pregnant twice in the book.
And that's a really good point, that sometimes all she has to do in these books is mention something. It's not that she necessarily explores these topics, but when you drop in a comment about somebody getting pregnant and you're like, oh God, what did they do? Right there, you as the reader, you're identifying with that feeling, right? In Sally, do you remember somebody gets pregnant? I think it's her aunt. I think it's her Aunt Betty. And everybody's talking. They're so excited about the addition. There's going to be an addition.
Oh,
it's like, what? What's the addition? What is it? But again, nobody will talk about it, and they won't tell her. She's like, how can it be such a happy thing if you won't tell me what it is? Okay, first kiss.
I want to say Margaret, but there might be other stuff.
Margaret. Deanie, she has her first kiss.
Oh, that's right.
Divorce.
Oh, that's, it's not the end of the world.
Yes. Erections.
I didn't like that book that much.
I was not able to find it this time around. I read it when I was a kid, and I loved every book that I read.
I didn't read it again recently. I mean, I haven't read it probably since I was a kid. I just went and read the synopsis, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that book. The whole thing is, I mean, a lot of her books are tough. Then again, maybe I won't. Deals with a lot of other, a lot of stuff, but it's not the end of the world. It's kind of depressing from the beginning. There's not a lot of uplifting stuff in that book.
She says that was a very difficult book to write. It's a difficult book to read, but she said it was very necessary because she needed to put out there, she needed to show people what the process was and to validate people for the feelings that they were having. And then, of course, when they get their feelings validated, then they start to feel normal. And that's really all she wanted. She just wanted to know that she was normal. So she's trying to tell those kids who are going through that experience that they're normal. So that was a hard book for her to write, and it's a hard one to read.
Yeah. Back to the erection.
Back to the erection. And particularly unwanted erections.
Oh, well, that was then again, maybe I won't.
So that was another part of the book I didn't understand, where he's up at the board and he's trying to hide his erection with his math book. And I'm like, what is he doing with the book? I don't get it.
I remember what, and when I was skimming it this weekend, I didn't even get to that part, but tell me if I'm wrong, because this is how I'm remembering it from the last time I read it, which was the whole thing, which was probably when I was, a preteen. Doesn't he keep saying in the book, he just wants it to go down. He just wants it to go down.
Yes.
In my mind, I was thinking his zipper. And I remember thinking, why does he want his zipper to go down?
Just go down. He just,
I didn't know what an erection was. I mean, I probably read this book in, 4th grade.
Right. I'm pretty sure I was 4th grade too.
And just like Judy Blume says, this is a lot of stuff that I didn't really want to, I had an open relationship with my mom. I could have gone and asked her that, but I didn't want to.
No, you don't want to.
It was uncomfortable. Like I knew enough. I didn't know what it was in the book, what was going up. Why wouldn't he want it to go down? Why would he want it to go down? You would want your zipper to go up. But I knew it was uncomfortable enough that I didn't want to go.
You knew it had something to do with what was behind his zipper. Behind his zipper. Okay. War and death, particularly death from war.
I believe that's
Sally, isn't it?
Sally.
And then again, maybe I won't.
Yes. So
that's right.
His older brother, Vinny, is killed in Vietnam. And one thing that's really interesting about that is that he's a little ambivalent about it. And so she gives kids permission to have these odd feelings that aren't the feelings that adults would want them to have. You would want your child to be, my brother Vinny, I miss him so much. Well, maybe he didn't have much of a relationship with Vinny. And so he's like, God, do we have to go to the cemetery again? And then in Sally J, yes, Michelle, World War II, the whole book opens with the ending of World War II. And now Uncle Jack was going to come home. And then there's the whole Hitler part.
Yeah. I've got to find that book again. It wasn't at the library the online librry. I don't know where my copy is. Oh, I wish I could see you in person and then you could loan me one.
Only.
Okay. War and death, anxiety.
That's also then again, maybe I won't, because he actually gets hospitalized.
Yes.
Because he has such terrible stomach pains, and then they do all these tests and say, right, he's fine, but he has to go see a psychiatrist.
And they give him pills to take. And so he takes his pills and they make him feel much better.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was dealing with all the puberty feelings, all the boy periods and the erections, because of the neighbor girl, right? She's like, he was crushing on her. And then his parents were messed up because the brother had died in Vietnam. And then wasn't his friend like shoplifting?
Yeah, that was
he felt really uncomfortable with that. So he was dealing with a lot.
Yeah, and the mom got all, keeping up with the Joneses, and then there's the whole grandmother, and she, if you remember, she had cooked. That was her thing in the family. She lived with the family, and her job was to kind of cook and help around the house. And then when they get all well-to-do, they hire a maid because that's what all the neighbors have. And grandma doesn't have anything to do anymore, and she kind of retreats to her room.
And she never comes out, and she just watches TV.
Man, he had a lot going on.
Yes, he did. No wonder he had stomach pains.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting is all of those things are normal things, right? That is something that happens in the course of a normal life. I mean, you would hope that your brother wouldn't die. But still, nonetheless, those are things that happen in the course of a normal life. It doesn't mean they're not stressful.
Right. Oh.
Okay, we're getting serious now. Racism. Yeah.
Iggy's House, which was almost in my top 3. In fact, that is, that really would have, if I could, I wish I could have 4. I loved Iggy's House, and we're
going to give you a number 4. We're going to give you a number 4.
Thank you. I loved Iggy's House. I was so fascinated. I loved Winnie. I thought she was hilarious. That was one that my sister and I used to act out like in detail, like down to where I would pop my gum like Winnie, and
she gets in trouble.
I loved all those characters. I loved the Germs Incorporated was the racist mom of the little prissy girl. And, gosh, what a story though that resonates.
And that was
100% today.
That is a very ballsy first book. So Margaret is not her first book. Iggy's book is, Iggy's House is her first book. They came out in the same year. They both came out in 1970. And I reread Iggy's House right after George Floyd was killed because white people are in the midst of like examining every word, everything, every thought, everything that's been taught to them over the course of their lifetimes. And I wanted to go back and see, what was I taught as a kid? Where did my ideas about race come from? And so I went back to Iggy's House and I was amazed at how Judy Blume, this white lady, was able to portray this very nuanced and complex idea of racism in a very easy and digestible way. And yet at the same time, she doesn't spell things out and she's not preachy. So Winnie, we know now because we have words for it, Winnie was essentially trying to be a white savior. Mm-hmm. But it's not working. Judy Blume does not allow her to jump in and save the Black family that moved into the neighborhood. She wants to badly, but that's not how this problem is going to be solved. And so Winnie keeps getting knocked down by trying to save them. I mean, I'm sure Judy Blume didn't do that on purpose. I'm sure she didn't. I think there must be some instinct going on in her head that allows her to do this. So I would say a book about racism written for children in 1970 is still working today.
It should be assigned reading.
I agree.
Today.
I agree.
It's so Winnie is all of us. She's all the children. She's all the adults wanting to say the right thing, but kind of not knowing what is the right thing to say.
Right.
But having nothing but good intentions in her heart, right? And so at the end of the day, though, what I love about it is at the end of the day, she just realizes the best thing she can do is just be their friend, right? And just be herself and be their friend.
Be their supporter. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a great book. It's still relevant today.
It's still relevant today. There's some terminology that is outdated, but there are topics that are important to bring up to kids, like blockbusting. At the time, I didn't really understand what blockbusting was. And now this is a historical concept that needs to be addressed and our kids need to know about it.
Right.
Okay, shoot. I had one more thing to say about, I know what it was. Okay. So when we're in the midst of examining our own programming as children, I was wondering what would have happened, right? We believe what the people around us believe. We believe what we're given. I was given Iggy's House. So that's the seed that was planted for me. What if Germs Incorporated had gotten to me first? Mrs. Landon, who's the woman on the block who wants to get the Black family to move out. What if Mrs. Landon had gotten to me first instead of Iggy's House getting to me first? Would that have been my programming? Mm-hmm. Right? It just shows you how easy it is to point a child in the right or wrong direction.
Definitely.
Okay, I'm still going with my list. And actually, there are little aspects of racism planted throughout her books. In Sally J, they're traveling on a train from New Jersey to Florida, and she's playing with a little girl from a Black family, and eventually she comes back and they're gone. They made them move into the quote-unquote colored car. And she's asking her mother why they had to move. And her mother's like, stop asking so many questions. It's just the way it is. We're in a different part of the country now. And she's challenging her mother on this. And her mother's like, just stop it. It's just the way it is. And it's 2 pages. It's barely anything in the book, but she drops it in there. Interestingly, my mother had the same experience when she was growing up, going on a road trip with her family from California through the South. And her mother gave her the same answer. She's pushing her mother on how come they can't go in this bathroom with me. And her mother's like, it's just the way it is. Just go to the bathroom. It's just the way it is.
My mom had the same one, driving from New York to Florida and getting a drink from the water fountain and going to the wrong one. And my grandfather pulling her away and her not comprehending that why couldn't she use this water fountain? And it had said colored up above it, but she didn't even... It didn't even register with her.
And on the list of things you can't talk about. And so I'm sure nobody was answering her questions.
Exactly.
Can't talk about it. Following close on the heels of racism is anti-Semitism.
Isn't that Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret?
Honestly, it's in all of them.
I was going to say it's starring Sally J. Friedman as herself too.
It's certainly Sally J. In Margaret, remember her mother, her grandparents disowned her mother because she married a Jew.
That's right. That's right.
So there are little pieces of it really dropped in throughout all of her books, probably because that was her experience growing up.
And that was my first experience with like anyone that was Jewish. Just even,
I agree. I think it was mine too.
Not till I moved from Texas to New Jersey did I know anyone that was Jewish. Did I even understand anything about it? It was just not, I was Catholic, and that was just not the right thing or whatever. It was, so that was my first experience of hearing it, reading about it, anything like that.
Yeah, that says a lot about the value of exposure, right? Some of us live in small towns. We only have exposure to the kinds of people that live around us. And in Judy Blume's books, you got to visit people who were Jewish and who lived in high-rise apartment buildings. Right? Indeed. And exposure is what allows us to be tolerant. Without exposure, we're not tolerant. Okay, here's an interesting one. It seems like a small thing, but to Judy Blume, it was a really big deal. Parents fighting.
That's in almost all of them, I would say.
It's in all of them. Yeah. All of them. And prior to Judy Blume, one thing she said she was never going to do, she said, parents fight. And she said, I am going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it. And none of my books will have the kids going to Aunt Becky's house. Because prior to Judy Blume, think about it. How many books were the children spending the summer at, the grandparents' house, or the parents weren't even there? Right? But she was like, this is ridiculous. I am going to deal with it. And part of it is because she was focusing on children. She was writing for children who are 11 and 12 years old. And that is the age at which you start to understand that your parents are real people. And I
think she does. It's not just the relationship of the parents with each other, but it's also the relationship with all of the characters with their parents, because it's also a very hard time. There's a lot of fighting with parents in it. There's, and it's just so realistic. It's talking about how, your parents might not understand you, or things you're starting to feel uncomfortable talking to your parents about. It's so realistic.
She has children being sassy to their parents, talking back to their parents, getting punished. She shows parents being vulnerable, like when the kids are being sassy or something, and they're like, oh my God, just like go away. And not saying the word cleaver thing, right?
Yeah, you're in this in-between stage when you're at the age of almost all of the main characters, is when you're in that kind of in-between stage where you still kind of want to be the little girl, the little boy, but you're growing up. And so you're kind of having to redefine your relationship with your parents. And so it's often very hostile. And she does a great job of reflecting that. And so then as a reader, you feel okay. You feel like,
yeah, you know that you're normal, and that's what she's trying to do. Okay. This one was easy. Scoliosis.
Oh, that's Deanie.
And we were all terrified of scoliosis, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
So scared. And did you guys have to watch the movie where they did surgery?
Oh, no. What?
Why did they do that?
Oh, I didn't watch it.
We had to go to the gym teacher and bend over. And then you came back in and you watched a movie about scoliosis. And they showed you how if you had scoliosis, you would either have to wear this cage on your body. If you didn't wear the cage, then you had to have surgery. And you guys, they showed the surgery.
What?
They pulled off the skin. You could see the vertebrae. You could see the muscles. It was a shit show.
That's terrible, because it's not like it's a scare tactic, like when we saw the films of the lungs after you smoke.
Or the
scoliosis is something you can't help.
I know. Why would they want to scare you? Scare you into what? You can't behave differently and get rid of scoliosis.
Right.
Isn't that horrible? Oh my God, grown-ups are ridiculous. Bullying.
Blubber.
Blubber.
Well, probably other ones too, but Blubber for sure.
Blubber for sure was centered on that. And that she said she wrote after her daughter would come home from school and tell her stories about what was happening in school, on the school bus. It's very much about school bus culture. And in all of these stories, the teacher was doing nothing.
Right.
And she just couldn't stand it. For me, I reread that recently, and it was very painful to read.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that that's one of my top 3 and one of the ones I reread more than any others, because I hate conflict. I'm very uncomfortable with people fighting. I'm very uncomfortable with situations like that. So maybe I read it, maybe actually it makes a lot of sense. It's the reason I read it all the time. But I usually that kind of stuff makes me just imagining a lot of the things that take place in that book make me uncomfortable now at age 51.
And so that was sort of your way of dealing with conflict.
Maybe, yeah.
One of your coping mechanisms. Okay, one last one, and it's a doozy. Touching a penis.
Well,
you could say. Then again,
the girl touching. Yeah.
Yes, the girl touching the penis. Oh, good. Thank you for the differentiation.
Forever.
Okay, you guys, we're going to have to pause our conversation right there because, as you can imagine, we had a lot to say about Forever and Ralph and all that other good stuff. So if you want to hear what we had to share, we would love for you to join us on our podcast next week for part 2 of our Judy Blume and Forever discussion, because we know that's why you tuned in to begin with anyway. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, we would be forever grateful if you would leave us a glowing review or just a good rating, and subscribe if you want to never miss out on an episode. We hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of Judy Blume and Ralph. See you then.
Information, opinions, and comments expressed on the Pop Culture Preservation Society podcast belong solely to me, the Crushologist, and Carolyn and Hello Newman, and are in no way representative of our employers or affiliates. And though we truly believe we are always right, I guess there's always a first time. The PCPS is written, produced, and recorded at Modern Well, a woman-centered co-working space in Minneapolis, Minnesota, home of the fictional WJM studios and our beloved Mary Richards. Nanu Nanu, keep on truckin', and may the force be with you.
We get a happy feeling when we're singing a song.